What is the role of religion in our ever-changing world? From the News Channel 5 network, this is Issues of Faith.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Issues of Faith. Glad you are with us. We are talking about gospel's call to work for social justice. The gospel's call to work for social justice. And we're talking about the social gospel movement. And happy to have with us as our guest Dr. Aaron Stauffer. He's Reverend Dr. Aaron Stauffer, an ordained minister in the Presbyterian Church, PCUSA, with Vanderbilt Divinity School. Reverend Stauffer, thank you for being with us. Now, all right, so let me ask you, what is the social gospel movement?
Yeah, so the social gospel movement is a long tradition within the Christian church of faith leaders and clergy, men and women, who have believed and acted on the belief that the gospel calls them to transform the structures of society in the direction of justice. That God calls them to be involved in the public arena to work for economic justice, for racial justice, for gender justice. It began and was, at the turn of the 20th century. Its high tide was around the 1920s and 1930s. The two world wars really brought in a whole transformation within the religious public's understanding of optimism, of being able to construct and bring down to earth the kingdom of God. But today it still lives on within many of the social justice movements that we see today, for immigrants' rights, for racial justice, for economic justice, for labor rights. It is the basic, belief and commitment that Christians have something to say about society, and that Christianity calls them into the public arena and is not complete without that work.
And so it's interesting. So you're saying it started around early 1900. Has it waned? Did it peak and now is it waning? Are you hoping for a resurgence, or where are we now?
Yeah, this is a great question because it, asked me to tell the story of modern theology. What's the rise and the ebbs and flows of this, right? It certainly had its high point in the 1920s and 1910s and 1930s when the Christian churches and their, ecumenical bodies were the strongest within public life, right? The world wars, as I mentioned, and then the rise of a couple of individuals within theology, Reinhold Niebuhr, Karl Barth, Paul Tillich, these individuals helped to chasten our understanding of sin, to put it theologically, how it is that society and politics within society is consistently about conflicts of power, and how it is that Christian communities need to reckon with that and the deep evils within society, whether that was understood to be racial injustice, economic injustice, feminist movements. The reality of the social gospel movement was this belief that we could and Christians can change the world for the better. But the sort of reality of that this will be hard work it forces us to ask different questions about what theology and the social gospel movement can actually still achieve today. Nowadays, yes, I think that you don't often hear the term of the social gospel movement. That's right. But that does not mean that its basic theological, its political, and its economic commitment are not still with us and alive today. Christian churches, Christian denominations have varied and less institutional and political power than they did before. Our society has become more pluralized, more pluralistic. So we have different voices. This is a good thing. But what that does mean, however, is that for those Christians then are not the only voice in the room, that we then have to begin to converse with others and think about how many different denominations, many different religious traditions call us into the public arena. And so I think it's still very much alive and well with us today. It just looks different than it did before. And that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, and so churches have received criticism for being way too involved, perhaps on the right and the left. But what is this? Is this being involved on the left? What about being politically involved? Is this more of left-leaning political involvement? And what about those who would say, watch out there?
Yeah, I think this is a great question because it gets at really a fundamental mistake in how it is we think about the relationship between religion and politics. Politics is already religious, right? Politics is about the contestation for the common good. And many people hold these goods really dearly. You know, we love things intensely. We hold people and values sacred, and we're called to act for them. The idea that religion only has to do with our beliefs mistakes the reality that religion is really about our ethics, about what we do in public together and how it is we are together. And so, sure, this is a claim of religion taking action within politics. That's right. But I think to take the opposite stance, right, to act as if religion has nothing to do with politics, does our political life a disservice. That exits the room of politics. And democracy thrives when there is greater participation by all. And so this is, in this sense, I think it's a healthy politics. It's a strengthened politics, because it's recognizing that our faith is fundamentally about the things that we hold most dear. And that calls us to work and act with others in the public around these items.
What are the greatest calls right now within the social gospel movement? What are the causes that are the greatest?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you were to turn on the news and you were to look at any of the recent, within the last couple of years, you'll see many of the fights that are really important to Christians today acting in public. I think you'll see things around healthcare. You'll see things around racial justice. You'll see things around economic justice. But I think what's particularly important about this is that for many of the Christians who see social justice and organizing movements as expressions of their faith, they see these causes as integrally connected, that you have to be able to fight for economic justice in a way that also fights for racial justice, right? These things are not completely isolatable. You can't separate that because our lives are integrally connected with each other. So I think that, I think there are many big causes that are important to social movements. But I think certainly the top three that I mentioned there, right? Racial justice, economic justice, labor fights, and I think the fights around healthcare are huge.
And this is tough, but abortion has been a big issue. It's a big issue in the religious community. It's a big issue now with the overturning of Roe v. Wade. Where does that fall? Or are these more economic issues that you're focused on? But certainly when you talk about, churches, religion getting involved in some of these issues, that's one that rises in people's heads.
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, I think that it's the importance of seeing everything as interconnected here helps us see how it is that, isolating these issues, it really is an incomplete analysis. How it is that we have to be able to see that healthcare and economic justice and racial justice are all of a part, right? And so that's part of the Christian church, though, too, right? We care about Christians' whole lives. And so I think it's about seeing these things as together, and that's always been a part of the social gospel movement. To see how it is that as new issues cropped up, they did the hard work of thinking about theologically where their church calls them to and how they should act, and then they adjudicated, made judgments, and then took action on this. And so what's good about this? The good news here is that this is not something new under the sun, that we have a deep and wide tradition of Christians who feel the call into the work of public justice, on economics, on racial justice, that we can draw from and that we can learn from. So I think that the social gospel tradition really provides us a good way of seeing how things are. The fancy word for it is intersectional, right? How things are connected to each other.
When we talk about religion, we've talked about it on this show, sometimes the divisive nature of things in our political lives now, it's just a little overwhelming. It's very difficult. How does this fit into that? How can this help solve that and not exasperate that?
Yeah, I mean, I think this goes to the connection, how it is that politics and religion are already deeply connected. The more that we try to fracture ourselves based around, tribal lines of red and blue, I think we miss the reality of that politics is fundamentally different from partisan work. This is what the social gospel is about. Democratic politics as concerned with the common good, the things that we hold most dear. And so insofar as our alliances tie us to parties more so than to each other, I think that spells the demise of the work of politics itself, which is the ability to negotiate, the ability to talk to one another, the ability to build relationships that then connect us to each other and to each other's experiences, that then say, I have to stand up for you because you're my neighbor and I know you now. I cannot look away. So that's part of this connection here. The social gospel always understood the importance of building relational power, the importance of tying any sort of policy matter into a deeper human fabric, which has to do with human communities. So it makes sense that the church would care about this, right? Because the church is a human community, and it cares about individual Christians' lives. And insofar as individual Christians' lives are suffering in some way or matter, the church then is called to act for that. So I think that's part of the balm here, the good news, right? Is that this is, one, we're not alone in doing this, but then two, the reality that insofar as sort of partisan ideology divide us, it mistakes the deeper human element of this work, which is building relationships and then building solidarity and then acting for things and people that you care deeply about.
I want to talk, we have to take a break, then come back and talk about how you can get your hands dirty, how you can actually get out there, make a difference, and begin this work. We'll take a break, be back right after this.